The punishing virus. One could say that this is the reason for the fall of humanity and for the destruction of all hope back when it first appeared. But why was the generator of that virus made? Does the virus even work? And is the virus really something that intentionally tried to destroy humanity right from the start? So many questions, but still little answers. So in this video, we're going to dive deep into each piece of the puzzle, using hints from the story to form potential answers to our questions. And at the very end, perhaps, we'll uncover the real law that the punishing virus follows in its most primitive state. But before we get into it, let's go over some key points about the punishing virus and the corrupted that's mentioned in the game, starting with the basic knowledge that's instilled by Babylonia in 5 major points. Point 1. The punishing virus originated from labs according to Hassan, the leader of humanity. To be more exact, the loading screen mentions that it appeared in the vacuum chamber of the first zero-point reactor. When the mass deployment process led to explosions and leakage of that reactor, it spread all over the globe through the atmosphere. Point 2. When a human is infected by the punishing virus, their cellular structure is damaged, but if a mechanoid gets infected, their logic circuits get manipulated. Number 3. According to one of the loading screens, there are 4 types of punishing virus zones on Earth: low, medium, high, and deadly. The last one in particular is called dead zones, due to the high-density punishing virus that renders serums and infra devices useless, and due to the fact that the corrupted go berserk. This means humans and constructs have severely low chances of survival in these dead zones. Point 4. The corrupted are only interested in erasing humanity, so they assume that the only goal it has is to destroy everything that shows human consciousness and behaviors. This is further supported by the information seen in one of the loading screens. Point 5. The corrupted only followed the kill order of the punishing virus. They have no consciousness, which is why they are considered puppets controlled by the virus. This is further supported by graffiti artist Nozzle, who implies that all machines will be enslaved by the punishing virus. And those are the 5 main points to remember. I don't expect you to recall everything already, so we'll be referring back to these 5 points continuously throughout the video. Now, let's uncover the potential answers and theories to my questions from before. Number 1. Why was the generator of that virus made? Well, remember point 1 from earlier? That humans accidentally created the punishing virus in their labs, in the vacuum chambers of the zero-point reactors? There's something else that we need to remember. From the loading screen, it's quite clear that the reactors generated the virus, albeit it probably wasn't their initial intention for sure at the time, but it did generate it at extremely high density levels. The only thing though is that it's never explained why those reactors were made in the first place. Maybe it was to have a more stable and powerful source of energy? A potential theory, since we know that the Golden Age before the current time worships science more than anything, first mentioned in Hidden Story Chapter 6 by Lee. And if the Golden Age is anything like the Age of Enlightenment, the 17th and 18th century movement in Europe that questioned anything irrational such as religion and pushed for revolutionary developments, then one can imagine just from this knowledge and the small lore bits provided in the story about the Golden Age on what that scale of development may be like in a more modern setting. Clearly a lot of technological developments. And if that's the case, then they definitely needed more sources of energy to power everything they created from the science they worshipped. And if the zero-point reactor is something similar to nuclear reactors, then one of its purposes being to produce some kind of energy in power plants doesn't seem too far-fetched of an idea. After all, it makes sense if such powerful energy can produce such a powerful effect, such as the proliferation of the punishing virus. This leads us to the next question. Number 2. How does the virus even work? If we take the idea of the zero-point reactor being similar to how nuclear reactors work further and consider the virus a byproduct of this new energy source, then it's possible that the virus could have taken on some of the energy's properties itself, such as being able to power things. Now before you write it off, listen for a bit longer. Because if this is the case, then it might explain how the virus can manipulate logic circuits of machines in point 2 to turn them into corrupted in the first place. Because even if the machine's infected by a virus, they need to work first. But in order for them to work, they need power, and assuming the power source in the machines lasts temporarily, they'll need more power later. Because without power, even if the circuits are being controlled, nothing will move. It's like trying to run a line of code on a dead computer. Not going to work. Might be another reason why the corrupted scavenge for parts from any fallen constructs, perhaps to absorb energy from them as a way to increase their lifespan in the host. Almost like a rechargeable battery. At least in its most primitive state, since Chapter 1 explains the more primitive corrupted desire power over anything else. And if the energy source the virus comes from is similar to how nuclear energy is, then the other aspects of the virus make sense. For example, the virus damaging cellular structures of organisms in point 2 is like radiation, the cause of the virus spreading due to the reactors exploding and leaking, and the way the virus spreads airborne in point 1 is just like how it is for radioactive contamination and radiation exposure. With that in mind, let's recall what point 3 said about the dead zones, in particular 2 things. One is that high-density punishing virus renders infra devices useless, while the second is that the corrupted go berserk in such zones. So, if the punishing virus truly did adopt some properties of the energy source that it came from, and act similar to radiation, then there's something interesting that we can extrapolate from the information that I mentioned for point 3. First, do you know what happens when electronics are exposed to high levels of radiation? Well, according to Dr. Robert Bauman, the Director of Radiation Effects and Reliability at the University of Texas, the excess charge will change the performance and operation of the transistors. Transistors are, in its most simplest form, like an electronic switch, controlling the flow of the electric currents with its gate. You can think of the transistor as a faucet for electrical currents, while the gate is the handle of that faucet. So with that in mind, when transistors start accumulating the damage from radiation exposure and reach a high enough dose of it, the transistor will stop working as intended. It'll either be on or off. The best way to put it is with his own words. Imagine your home faucet with water gushing out, and no matter how hard you try to turn the handle, nothing happens. Understanding this brings up a few interesting points about the dead zones. One is inver devices that are rendered useless in the dead zones. Assuming that the inver devices are a type of electronic or mechanical device that requires power of sorts, it may be the type that permanently stops working when overcharged, or in this case, is like the transistor that stops working when it reaches a high enough dosage of radiation. Maybe it's because of the fact that the inver devices aren't charged by the punishing virus, so there's an incompatibility with it, or maybe it's something else. I don't really know yet. But the second is that the corrupted go berserk in these zones. If the punishing virus really does have the properties of the energy source it came from, then it could be that it overcharged its own host, causing it to get out of control. Much like the transistor that never turns off due to its high dosage of radiation. And perhaps because of the fact that the virus charges the corrupted, at least when we assume that the theory is right, there's a strong compatibility with it, enabling this crazy behavior. But again, these are just theories. So to put it simply, the effects of the punishing virus at high density levels have 2 effects on electronics and machinery. It's either off or on, just like the transistors affected by radiation in real life. That's why I believe the punishing virus has similar properties as radiation, which further solidifies that the energy source the virus came from may have similar properties as nuclear energy as well. But to be very clear, I'm not saying that the energy source the virus comes from is nuclear energy, nor am I saying that the punishing virus is radiation, because it's not, and it won't be. Instead, we're just comparing them, so that's easier for you to understand my theories of how the virus works and how everything ties together using the hints and lore bits provided by the game. Overall though, my answer for this question is that it most likely works like a mix between a rechargeable battery and radiation. Which leads us to the next part of the puzzle. Number 3. Did the virus intentionally try to destroy humanity from the start? Yes and no. Yes, it did intentionally try to destroy and still is trying to destroy humanity, but maybe not at the very beginning. While we know that the virus has properties that affect humans negatively in the form of making them, perish permanently, I actually have a different theory about why or how the intentional targeting of humanity came to be. And in order to figure that out, first let's assume that the virus follows the theory of evolution by natural selection. In that case, my theory is that when the punishing virus first escaped from the reactor, through the explosion and leakage, the actions the humans took at the time to contain and remove the virus could have caused the first version of the virus to register and categorize humans as a threat to their survivability. So what would they do next? Evolve. Since the virus is known to evolve, or at least go to such disgusting lengths to destroy humanity, I think it's reasonable to assume that this particular virus went through multiple evolutionary stages, with the ingrained logic of point 4. To destroy all things that display human consciousness and behavior. All for the sake of survival as per the course of natural selection. So that's why when the humans get stronger, the virus too grows stronger by further evolving in order to prolong its lifespan in its host. This might explain why the virus doesn't need to communicate with each other, as Lee said in Chapter 1, to understand the course of action that it needs to take, which is to destroy humanity. This also further supports point 5 on why the corrupted target humanity. That's why I can't say that it's a yes or no, because the virus is intentionally trying to destroy humanity, but I don't think it was at the very start of its appearance, at the very least. Unintentionally making humans perish permanently? Yeah, but intentionally targeting from the very start, that seems a bit hard to believe. After all, the punishing virus doesn't target just humans. It also targets non-human beings who display human behavior. This means that the virus doesn't really understand the difference between human beings and human-like beings, and that it's just attacking anything that reminds them of what they consider to be a threat or human. Hence why it targets anything that displays human consciousness and behavior rather than just human beings themselves. Which leads me to my final question. Number 4. How does the virus categorize or register someone or something as human-like, as their enemy to eliminate? What primary behaviors does it look for in order to register something as human-like? Well, instead of blindly guessing what traits the virus looks for, I think it's better to focus on 3 prime examples of when the corrupted targeted non-human beings and registered them as enemies. First is Nozzle from Chapter 1, then it's Rohachi from Chapter 7, and finally we have Nanami from our Devour interlude. Now, what do the 3 have in common? All 3 display signs of free will, which I suspect is what the virus determines human behavior is like. And if that's the case, it explains why they were attacked by the corrupted, and in extension, identified by the punishing virus as a potential threat to their survivability, because humans do typically display a lot of free will. But if we do talk about free will, we can't leave out the most important commonality between 2 of the examples. Sage Machina. In fact, we learned 2 things from looking at Nozzle and Rohachi. One is that the mechanoids escaped from the virus control with the help of Sage Machina, and 2, the machines are able to let the virus overtake them at will. So, assuming that the punishing virus acts like a computer virus, which I know sounds a little silly, but bear with me, and the process of those mechanoids getting their freedom from it with the help of Sage Machina might be kind of similar to QR code hacking. In fact, maybe it's something along the lines of the machines most likely scan the code of graffiti, get the malware installed in them, and then maybe have that malware forcefully set the Destroy Humanity toggle inside the punishing virus to off as its new default setting, or something along those lines, potentially making the virus go into a passive state, focusing on its most primitive preference to power the machine if we go by my theory of the virus acting like a battery. Could explain why Nozzle in Chapter 1 doesn't need to grab power from anywhere else to function, since it still has the punishing virus inside them to power them, and why it can still allow the virus to overtake it at the end of that chapter, most likely in the form of turning off the passive state of that virus. This could also explain why Nozzle thinks that all machines will be enslaved by the punishing virus in Chapter 1, which I mentioned in point 5. Because if the virus continues to stay in the machines even after being enlightened by Sage Machina, and the machines have to continuously depend on the virus for power, then the machines need to stay enslaved by that virus in order to survive. Hence why it makes sense that Nozzle believes that all machines will be enslaved by it in the end. Now, it may not mean that their free will will be stripped away from them though, because in the end Sage Machina did free them from the virus control, but instead it mostly means that the machines will be in a symbiotic relationship with the virus for survival purposes. Despite this revelation though, we know that they'll most likely continue to be attacked by the corrupted, even if they're the same machine type and have the same virus inside of them, until all of the machines are enlightened by Sage Machina, as seen by Rohachi and Nozzle. But strangely, when I think of Nanami from the examples, I feel like she's a bit more on the special side, and this doesn't really very well apply in this context. Unless she's Sage Machina herself somehow, which might make sense and could make for an interesting deep dive if I happen to come across more evidence to prove it, but it won't be for this video for sure. So to summarize, because the origin of the virus comes from an energy reactor, the virus may work like a mix between a rechargeable battery and radiation, allowing it to control the corrupted and have it follow its orders to remove any threats to its lifespan and its host. And because of Sage Machina's interruption, robots with free will are also recognized as part of humanity, and thus an enemy against the punishing virus. With the virus inside of them most likely being switched to passive mode and it not being able to control its host anymore, it inevitably caused the robots to have free will, and ironically have them seen by the punishing virus as a threat, despite having the same kind of virus inside of them. With this, I think you might have an inkling about what the law is that the punishing virus follows, and that's the punishing virus must extend and prolong its lifespan. Quite simple, right? I bet many of you already figured it out pretty early on, or maybe even the middle of the video. Even if it's quite a simple rule, it's amazing how much it fits with the way the punishing virus essentially makes its decisions and performs all of its actions so far. At least with the chapters I've read so far, up to chapter 12 specifically at the time of this recording. I mean, come on. Why does this corrupted scavenge from fallen constructs? To prolong its life. Why does the corrupted desire power over anything else? To prolong its life. Why does the virus intentionally target humanity and view it as a threat? To prolong its life. Why does the virus grow stronger when humanity grows stronger? To prolong its life. Why does the virus make the corrupted attack human-like beings even if they have the virus inside of them? To prolong its life. See, all of the actions and decisions made by the punishing virus, along with the properties it most likely has, if my theories are correct, all point to this single law, to prolong its life. And while I don't have a clear answer yet on whether any of these theories that I did share in this video are actually true, I still do believe they answer a lot of questions that I had while reading the first 8 to 12 chapters. And I do sense that the single law could potentially answer any question I might have in regards to the virus and its potential growth in the future once I get past chapter 12. But I suppose we'll see if that really is the case, or if my theories are actually all bogus. How fun it'll be to find out myself as I continue with the story. In any case, be sure to keep an eye out for more Punishing Grey Raven lore theory videos on my channel as I wrap things up here. After all, I am an official content creator for Punishing Grey Raven, so you can definitely expect more PGR content from me in the future. But before I go, I want to give a quick shout out to my paid members on Discord, YouTube, and Patreon, along with the rest of my community who support and enjoy my content, and to you who finished watching this video. Seriously, if you watched the end, then thank you very much, because the majority don't end up finishing these videos. And if I could, I would cook you a nice meal as thanks, but since I can't, well, this is all I can do. But yeah, I'll get going now. See you later.